Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Like Cynthia said, I'm Noelle Wilson. I'm the intervention counselor at Eaton High School. I've been working in schools for, I don't even know, 12 years at this point, working with at-risk kids, helping students just through different barriers that they have in their lives, helping them overcome different obstacles, being an extra support, all those kinds of things. And part of that is helping to educate parents and students just on various topics that come up that are really challenging. So a couple years ago, I met Sarah at a training, and ever since then, I've just loved her presentation. She does a great job explaining things to our families about social media. So I asked her to join today and co-host with me. And so I'm going to roll it over to her. Just so you know, in the chat box, I've put a handout for our presentation. You don't have to have it, but if you are like me and you like something tangible and something to write on, feel free to take that and just kind of follow it along with us. If you need access to that, feel free to reach out in the chat and I'll help you with that if you can't get to it. But either way, I'm gonna pass it on to Sarah now. So Miss Sarah.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm going to keep us both spotlighted because we're going to do a little bit of back and forth, me and Miss Noelle. So I got into speaking about social media kind of completely 100% by accident. Because of when I grew up generationally as social media was rolling out. And so we were the first little section of kids on social media. And I've realized that I use social media a lot like teenagers do. But I also remember a time before social media, you know, when we would talk on the phone with the curly cord and we'd have to walk around the corner so no one in our house could hear us. I totally remember that as well. So I also work with teenagers in a little bit different capacity. I work a lot with the students at our church, but over the past couple of years, I've also worked through an organization in the community that works with a lot of at-risk students, running support groups for them and just trying to help them navigate life because it's crazy. It's hard being a teenager. So with all of that combined, I realized as I was working with my teens in these different capacities that their parents had no idea what was going on with social media, and that was very frustrating to them. And then I realized I knew exactly what was going on with social media because I was once a teenager on social media. But I also related to the parents because I remember not being on social media. And so I kind of fit perfectly. I like to say that I'm digitally bilingual. I kind of fit perfectly between generations. And it has become one of my deepest passions, helping bridge these generational gaps because I know it can be frustrating. So Noelle and I will be answering questions at the end. So if you have a question, if you need clarification on something, write it down, even put it in the chat right now if you want to, and we will address that kind of towards the end. But what I want to do, really simple, we're going to do this in two parts. I'm going to talk first, kind of big picture. Why does social media matter? Why does it matter that you showed up here on a Tuesday night, you sacrificed an hour of your time? Is it worth it? The answer is yes. We're going to talk about why, 3 reasons. And then we're going to talk about, okay, so now that we've talked about some of these tension points, what do we do now? And we will give you 3 very practical things that you can be doing now to help foster maybe a better technology environment in your home. So first off, why does social media matter? And here's what I mean by that question. Why is social media such a big deal to your kids? If you have ever taken a phone away, you've realized really quickly, oh my goodness, this is a huge deal to them. Why is that? Number one, let's see if I can multitask here. Number one, why does social media matter? It matters because it is your kids' social life. Okay, this sounds maybe obvious, but let me explain what I mean. Those of us who did not grow up in a digital environment, we just did things differently. We understood kind of this hierarchy of communication. If we needed to go have a serious conversation with someone, we would do it face to face. If we needed to tell our boss something, we would email them, maybe send a fax back in the day. If we
Pager.
were, yeah, if we were going to talk to our great aunt, we'd probably give her a phone call. We really wouldn't text someone unless it was a very close friend and we were just telling them something quick. I mean, this makes sense to us, right? Even as I'm explaining this, you're like, oh yeah, that's totally how communication works. Well, that's how we grew up. And then enter social media and technology when everything has changed. There is no hierarchy anymore. Our kids can send the same message across 18 different channels, and they truly do not understand the difference between them. Like we live in a very online, offline world. We're like, oh, that was online, and then now I'm living in real life. There is no difference to our kids. Generationally, the mindset of our children is life. Some of it plays out online, some of it plays out offline. They don't draw that distinction because they've never known a life that was split like we have. So here's an example of this. I was going to talk to some 5th grade girls a couple years ago, and the lady that brought me in to talk to them, I was going to talk about social media. And the lady that brought me in, as I'm walking into the room to talk to these kids, she goes, hey, by the way, I asked these girls what some of the topics were that they wanted to learn about, and nobody said social media. So I'm not sure how this is going to go. And I was like, first off, that's a great pep talk. Thank you. Thank you for that. Second, what were some of the things they did want to talk about? Oh, things like bullying. Okay, well, where's the bullying happening? Is the bullying happening on Instagram, or is the bullying happening in the hallway? Well, I don't know. They didn't specify. No, and they're not going to. What are some of the other things they wanted to talk about? Well, just friendships and dating. Okay, well, where are they talking to boys? Is it on Snapchat, or is it at the park? Well, I don't know. They didn't specify. No, and they're not going to, because they don't see the difference. So when our kids say, I talked to so-and-so today, that could mean, hey, me and Noelle saw each other on a video call, or it could mean I commented on her Instagram, I saw her Snapchat story, I FaceTimed her. It could mean I met her for coffee. They straight up do not differentiate between online and offline. And this is really, really important for us to understand, because generationally, this is a huge difference. And it should frame the way that we talk about social media. Because a lot of times what happens is we get frustrated by the amount of time our kids are spending with their technology. And so we say something like, Noelle, help me out. Put your phone down and have a what?
A real conversation.
A real conversation. Here's the thing. They are having a real conversation. In their mind, it is a real, valid, 100% okay format for communication. And you'll notice, Noelle, we don't have teenagers, but we both work with them. Does it go well when things like that are said to them? Put that down.
Oh, no.
A real conversation. Is that received well? No.
No,
because
not at all.
It feels as though they're being attacked, and it's not because they love their phone that much. It's because their phone is their social life. It is the digital extension of their social life. This is huge for us to understand, because this is a huge mindset difference. Mm-hmm. And so what we can do to better have conversations, instead of put that down and have a real conversation, let's talk about time management. Let's talk about, hey, how, I love your friends. I love it when they come over. I love that you get to talk to them. At some point, they gotta go home, right? Like, they can't just live here indefinitely, either in person or on your phone. There are times when they need to go home, and that's okay to set those boundaries. Noelle, anything to add on this first one here?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you gave the example. So I was thinking too, just like with us growing up, when we had, the phone, you had to walk around the corner.
Right.
Your parents are saying, hey, get off the phone. Hey, get off the phone. How annoyed did we get? I think it's the same way. It's just like, oh, 5 more minutes. And then 15 minutes goes by. No, now. And you're like, oh, no, 5, I think it's the same thing. But what's, I think, harder for kids, that's already difficult, for us as teens. But now they have 20, 30, 40 people essentially at a time that they're
Right.
trying to disconnect with. And that's just not an easy task for them.
No, and we will talk about boundaries a little bit later because that is so important. When I say it's their social life, I also want to real quick draw a distinction before we move on to the second one. I'm going to talk in general terms about boys and girls and how they use social media. Your kid might not be this way, but just generally, this is kind of how it works. Girls generally are very active on social media. If they're on it, they're pretty active. They're the ones posting, commenting, liking, that kind of stuff. Boys are not as verbal on social media. They're not as verbal in real life either, right? So they're not as verbal on social media, but they're seeing the same things. Like they're seeing everything. They're just not leaving a digital footprint of it. But when I say that social media is their social life, for boys and girls who like to game, this also includes gaming. When you ask your kids to turn off their game and they freak out, it's probably because they're playing a game that has a social component to it. And so that's why they're freaking out. It's not because they love Fortnite that much. It's because they want to hang out with their friends that much. And so if we just change the way we talk about it, it's disarming to our kids. Instead of me attacking the way you're hanging out with your friends, let me rephrase this and say, let's talk about time management. So, important, but also just like with simple word changes, I think it alleviates some of the tension. So number 2, why does social media matter? That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. I'm going to keep stalling until I can.
Let me think about that while you get that screen going.
There we go. Okay, there it is. Because it affects their identity. It matters that we talk about social media. It matters that we are involved in our kids' social media because social media affects our kids' identity. So honestly, this is kind of how I got into talking about this, because I wrote a blog post on a blog that was not a thing. Like it was not a thing, definitely not a thing where I talked about parenting teenagers on social media. But I wrote this post about this concept and it just exploded. It went viral because it was very apparent very quickly. Oh, this is a thing that we need to be talking about most. So we talk a lot about physical safety, the physical safety of social media, but this is like the internal heart safety that is just as devastating if we don't do a good job with it. So if you think about, when I'm making assumptions here, I can't actually see most of you, so I'm just going to assume. But when we were growing up, we knew someone was popular based on the powers of observation, right? I mean, I can tell that Noelle is popular because she's nice and funny and
wears the right things.
Yeah, she wears the right thing. Maybe she dates the quarterback. They sit at the cool kids table where people seem to want to sit. I mean, we knew vaguely who was cool, but we couldn't tell you specifically how cool they were or why. I mean, the specifics of it were not a thing that we had until social media. So when I was growing up, I knew that someone was cool, but I couldn't tell you how much cooler they were than me. Or I knew someone was a nerd. I couldn't tell you how nerdy they were compared to me. Well, now we have a whole bunch of numbers on social media. We have likes, we have follows, we have tags, we have retweets, we have Snapchat streaks, you fill in the blank with your measurement, and you come up with a number of how popular you are. And then you compare that to everyone else's number. In comparison, she has this many followers, I have this many, he has this many. Okay, well, I know to the digit where we stand in the social pecking order. I mean, what used to be assumed is now specific and quantifiable. And this is incredibly important because I don't know if you guys remember growing up during this time, but it's painful. Like you're trying to figure out who you are and why you matter. And we did not grow up against these numbers. These numbers are crushing. I took this idea of like quantifiable popularity. I took this idea back to some of my teen friends and I'm like, do y'all feel this? Is this a thing? Or am I making this up? Am I overthinking this? And at the time, no one was talking about this. And so you could like almost physically see this weight being lifted off these kids' shoulders. And they were like, oh, I've never heard it expressed, but that's exactly what I feel. And I mean, today they're like, I don't even want to be on Snapchat, but everyone's on Snapchat. And I feel so much pressure to keep the streaks up, which means you talk to someone every day and they keep these streaks. Like, I've talked to you for 500 days. To break a streak is to break a relationship. I mean, the pressure these kids feel to keep up with the dumbest things is very, very real. And even they want to escape from it. They're like, yeah, I delete posts when I don't get enough likes. And I don't like that I do that, but it's embarrassing. I can't leave it up there with 32 likes. Nobody gets 32 likes.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, when they're at the high school in person, they talk about it. They do call each other out, whether it's at lunch, in the hallway. Oh, that girl, I don't even know how these kids know each other, but somehow they see someone else's Snapchat or Instagram or what have you, and they all call each other out. And then it's almost a form of bullying at that point.
It is. And that's, that's a good point, Noelle, because when we were growing up, we had our 8 or whatever. I mean, we might know acquaintances. I didn't know what was going on in their life. Like, I didn't have intimate details of their everyday existence like I do now. And so our circle of 8 is now our circle of 2,000 because we follow all of these people and we feel the pressure to keep up. And it's that heightens even more the importance of fighting against these numbers. If you are leaving kids to Instagram, like, you'll be fine, just go. And we're never discussing how whack these numbers are. They take them to heart, and that becomes part of their identity. This is fixable. Just like you talk to them about all the ways that they're amazing, this has to just be directly tied to, okay, let's talk about how dumb those numbers are. A, you can buy followers. She might have bought followers. B, nobody cares. Like, you're not going to become an adult and at your first job interview, they're like, now how many likes have you gotten? What's your best like, no, literally nobody.
What's your longest streak?
Exactly. What was your longest streak? Yeah. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's not the thing. But they feel the pressure to keep up with it, which is why it's so important. This is why it matters that we talk about this, because we have to help our kids see a bigger picture of this and fight internally and mentally against these numbers, because they feel very, very real. So that's number 2, why social media matters. It affects their identity.
I think another thing too, I know, Sarah, we talked about this at another one of these trainings with us, is to kind of monitor, and maybe we talk about it later, so I'm sorry if I jumped ahead, but the number of people they follow versus their number of followers.
Yes.
Essentially, they should be fairly equal.
Yes.
If it's concerning and maybe something to look at with your kids, or, maybe just have a conversation about, if they follow, let's say 200 people, but they have 2,000 people following them, might be something to be concerned about.
Right. Like, I want to know why they're following you.
Yeah. Why are so many people
that is that interesting?
Right. Or let's say I've seen a student's Instagram where there were 4 pictures total, just 4. And they were very just like, here's a flower, here's the grass, very nothing, but had a couple thousand followers.
Yeah.
And my question is, what are you sending in the messages? Because a lot of students use,
or what have you deleted, or
yes, or what have you deleted?
We're actually not talking about that tonight, so I'm glad you said that, because that's a fantastic measurement of, like, if we had ample time, we could go into a lot more stuff like that.
Oh, sure.
Like I call red flags. Maybe not a problem, but to me, if I'm seeing it as somebody who loves this teenager, I'm like, hey, that's a red flag. What's going on here? And I want to know how your heart is, because this doesn't seem right. So that's a very simple measurement to know, like, okay, are your followers sort of kind of equal to the number of people you're following? Because if social media is about friendship, then these should be your, like, actual friends. And if it's totally skewed like that, then you're following people you don't know. I don't like that. Whole bunch of people that don't know you are following you. I don't like that either, especially as a minor. Like,
yes,
I'm going to ask
especially as a minor is key.
Right. So they should be fairly equal if they're using it truly as like a friend thing. So that's a great point. Okay. So number 3, why does social media matter? It matters because there we go. It shapes our kids' view of reality. This is, I keep saying it's important. They're all important. There's only 3, so they can all 3 be important, okay? Just go with me here. This one is also important. Social media shapes our kids' view of reality. So we all know that person. We all know that person on Facebook who is constantly posting about how many workouts they've done or how smart their kids are, or they're just always posting these humble brags that as you're seeing it, you're like, hey, I don't mean to be rude, but I've met your child. I've met your child, and he's just not as smart as you're portraying him to be. So like, or hey, I've seen you though, and it doesn't appear as you've done that many, or whatever it is. Like, we know reality. We know that everything we see online is not always real. We know that people have filtered it and waited for the right picture, and then they've edited it. I mean, like, we know that the caption does not tell the full story, because we have lived enough life to know that all of life cannot be fit into like a pretty picture with a nice caption. It just doesn't work that way.
And how many times do you have to take that selfie or that group picture or
Correct.
the scenic photo? How many times
Correct.
do you have to take that before you're like, oh, this is perfect. Oh, look how perfect everything is in my life. But
Correct.
it's 30 minutes to try to prove to other people how perfect it was.
Exactly.
So
I remember
cute.
one time I started cleaning up the background in my kids. I was like trying to take a picture of my kid, and then I was like, oh, hold on, let me get this out of the background. And then I was like, oh, that's so stupid. Why am I doing this? But it is just it. We live in a world of highlight reels, and even as adults, we fight the urge to buy into that. You know, even as an adult, I can find myself, I feel like I'm competing with this picture of perfection, and then I think about it for 2 seconds, and I think, no, that's dumb. They're not showing reality. Neither am I, you know? So we understand this because we've had the life experience and the wisdom to know otherwise. Our kids just haven't. Their brains are not fully developed. They don't have the life experience. And so they believe that everything they see online is real life. They think that the greatest career in all the world is to be an Instagram influencer. And we are like, that has the shelf life of a goldfish. Or they, you know, I talk to girls who are just bawling about, I'm just never going to measure up to this, you know? And I'm like, sis, do you know, like, how many pictures she took to get this one? Like, do you know how long she spent to get this one little, no, you know, she always looks like that. No, I promise she doesn't. I saw her the other day. She's beautiful, but not, you know, they truly don't understand. So I knew this, but this was brought home. I'll tell one quick story and then we'll move on to the what to do now. But this was really brought home to me through an article I read several years ago about a girl named Madison Holleran who went to Penn. She was a track star. She was brilliant. She went to an incredible school. She had a family that seemed to really love and adore her. She was supported. She was all the thing. If you're checking a list of really successful young adults, she would have checked off every box. In her freshman year of college, at the end of her freshman year, she ended up taking her life on campus. And when they started to investigate what was going on, I'm not even going to pretend like we can know all the ins and outs of what went into that. It would be ridiculous to speak into that. But here's what I know. In the article, it was mentioning how Madison was having a conversation with her roommate about a week before. And Madison was struggling. She didn't feel like she was doing well in school. She felt like she was failing her friends. She didn't feel like she was doing well in track. She felt like she was failing. And she's sitting on her bed talking to her roommate, and they're scrolling through Instagram, looking at pictures of their friends at other schools. And Madison says to her roommate, what is wrong with me that I don't look like this? And she holds up the Instagram of fill in the blank friend at another school. And the most devastating thing in the world to me is that when you look at her Instagram, when you look at Madison's Instagram, it is perfect. It is picture perfect. Everything is in place. She always looks beautiful. She's always with her friends. So anyone else looking at it would be doing the exact same thing she was doing. But as an adolescent, as a young adult, she could not connect the dots that what I'm portraying on the outside does not match how I feel on the inside. She couldn't connect the dots that maybe somebody else is doing that too. She assumed that everything she saw was real, even though she was not portraying real. It is so important that our kids understand online is not real life. It's not. You're not going to live up to this. You're going to filter your face in a way that you're never actually going to look like that, and you're not supposed to. That's not what makes life awesome. What makes life hilarious is the times that we messed up and then try again. Or, I mean, that's what gives you the perseverance and all these things. So we have to help them understand everything they see online is not real. And it's not supposed to be. Like, that's not their measure of success. Anything to add to that, Noelle, before we get to our what to do now?
Sure. So just thinking of the mental health aspect of it, when you get so involved or enmeshed in this idea that I have to have X number of likes or X number of followers, and because like you said, it's a quantifiable thing. I can actually see on a ranking where I fall compared to my peers. I think it's, your mental health really starts to decline with that. Your self-esteem gets real shot. And when you just feel like you can't be enough comparing yourself to other people, you don't see yourself as enough, whatever. I think what's really important is just how are we boosting that in our kids? How are we letting them feel reassured that, you are enough, or that you're good enough, or like you were saying, social media is not real life. But then also, since it is their social life, how do you help them to differentiate? So I think it is just a lot of having really hard conversations often, maybe not just one time, maybe not every week, but more consistent, I think, is really important too. And really checking in with your kids. I think we'll get to this later, but really just kind of checking in with them and asking, like, how are you feeling about this? Or, I see that you're on this a lot, what's going on? What have you noticed it's different? How is that affecting you? Just really kind of checking in with them too, because it's very real. I mean, suicide through social media is very real. And that's why we have David's Law in place, because cyberbullying got so bad that a child took his life. And David's Law allows the school to start investigating cyberbullying and things like that as well. So, that's how real it is.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I was talking to, so I run support groups during school hours for kids in the area. And I was asking some of the girls, I was like, hey, how are you guys? How's life? What's going on? And we got on the topic of Instagram, and I just sat back and let these girls talk, and hearing them express how hard it is to feel like they have to always be perfect. Mm-hmm. They're like, you just can't, but to them, because they don't differentiate online, offline, it's not just that they have to be perfect on Instagram. That then translates into real life. Like, they feel like they have to be perfect in real life as well, because they don't differentiate, and because it shapes their view of reality. They think, not only do I have to post perfectly here and look perfectly here, I have to actually do that in real life too. I have to look like these models that have filtered their picture to the nth degree. That's what I'm supposed to look like in real life. And one of the girls goes, look at me. She's like, does it look like I'm succeeding? And I mean, I just let them talk, and it was really encouraging to me, honestly, because they started building each other up. And then they started talking about which we're going to jump to here in just a second, but they started talking about how they had to take breaks from it. They were like, for my mental health, I have to get off of this, because I never feel better after spending all this time on here. And I was like, yay, a breakthrough. I mean, it was really sweet. So, and
I haven't even had to say anything.
I know. I just was like, oh, perfect. Yeah, you guys figure this out.
So, I talked to a lot of my students about taking a screen detox.
Yes.
Because of how there's been so much research done on the effects of extra screen time in your mental health, to where too much screen time can even lead to having symptoms of depression, anxiety, trauma. I mean, you name it, psychosis, just from having too much of that fake light hitting your nervous system. And, you know, when you really think about it, if somebody's showing signs of anxiety or depression, when it could just be from too much screen time, parents will take them to the doctor, or a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist will just say, oh yeah, check, you meet the criteria for depression. Let's just start you on some medication. So then you're taking this medication that really is not going to work for you because you don't really have a diagnosis. It's just that you have too much screen time. So then you take medication that's not necessary, and then the medication doesn't work right. So then you have to add another medication on top, and it just becomes a huge mess. When really, what if we just not use a screen for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, see how that changes things, and then come back to, do we really have a diagnosis or not?
Yeah, no, that's so good. So let's talk about that real quickly. And then we'll get to questions if anyone has any, but what do we do now? Okay, that's cool information. I'm a little bit stressed out.
Sorry.
No, I mean, like, just generally, I wasn't even talking about you, just like the things we've presented, you might be feeling like, okay, I've got to go have some conversations with my kids.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's just talk real quick about what we can do. What Noelle said, well, no, we're going to get to it. So first, the first thing, this is so simple, you guys, but I cannot just express to you how important it is. That's my word of the night. Important is to evaluate your own example. So here's what happens more often than not. And I think we've realized over the years, adults have a major issue with technology. We have no boundaries whatsoever, but we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot when we're getting onto our kids all the time for being online. And then we are answering work emails at 11:30 p.m. Or we're getting onto our kids because we think that Among Us game is annoying, but then we spend hours on Pinterest or on, sportscenter.com, whatever it is. I mean, it's just so easy for us to point at the things that they are doing, not realizing we are setting the stage ourselves. And it has to start with us. We're not going to be the ones to harness social media for good. I guarantee it's going to be our kids. There's going to come a tipping point where they realize this isn't working right. Let's fix this. And that's going to be them. And I want to be one of the people on the sidelines cheering them on while they figure that out. But in the meantime, as I'm parenting my own children, I have 3 elementary school boys. As I'm parenting my own children and as I'm modeling this for my teen friends, I want to know that I'm not asking them to do something I'm not doing myself. So starts with evaluating your example. The second thing that I love this concept, I keep losing my little button here. Okay. Is to parent digitally to the extent that you parent physically. So we talked earlier about how our kids do not differentiate between online and offline, right? We kind of covered that. They view it all as life. It is just life. Some of it plays out online, some of it plays out offline, but it is just life. So our job, if you are not a digital native, if you're not even a digital bilingual, then your job is to connect those pieces yourself. So as you are parenting your children, the things that are important to you, that you are really bringing home in physical life, you need to also mentally draw the connection to digital life. Okay, so if my kid has a curfew in physical life, then what is their curfew in digital life? Mm-hmm. If I know where my child is in real life, if I know where his body is, who he's hanging out with, generally what they're doing, if they're good friends or not, if I know these things about his physical whereabouts, I need to know them about his digital whereabouts as well. So that doesn't mean that I have to read every text. That doesn't mean that I have to know every single website he's ever been to. What that does mean is I know generally who the influencers are that he's listening to. I know generally who he's subscribed to on YouTube or whatever. I know generally what games he's playing. I know generally where he is on social media apps and what he's doing. Like, what kinds of things are you posting about? What kinds of things are you following? It's this. Oftentimes we parent so well physically. We parent so well. We have all these really great rules. We have all these, we model things well for them. And then the digital just falls by the wayside because it's not natural to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have to do is connect the dots in our parenting. Okay, if this is an important parenting piece for me, then it also needs to be in physical life, then it also needs to be modeled in digital life. There is so much gross stuff online. And Noelle and I were talking about this. We could do a whole thing about the gross stuff online. I mean,
as much as I wouldn't want to.
I know.
It's, yeah.
One of the things I do also is that I work with trafficking survivors. And I just know more than I wished I did about the gross things that you can find online. So we're not going to cover a ton of that, but here's what you need to know. This is why this parenting digitally to the extent that you parent physically is so important. If you are not going to give your son a subscription to Playboy when he turns 13 or whatever, I don't even know like what magazines still come out, but whatever it is, if you're not going to like give him his own subscription and be like, you made it, man, then you cannot let him have his phone overnight, because it is so much bigger and so much more dangerous for him to have his phone overnight. That's parenting digitally to the extent that you parent physically. In the same line, if your 12-year-old daughter is like, hey, so I was thinking, I think I'm going to take some headshots of myself and maybe like 2 a.m. go to like downtown Dallas maybe and just pass them out and see if people think I'm pretty. What do you think about this? That's going to be a hard pass. Like, that's going to be a negative.
Absolutely not.
For this
right.
family. Yet we give her a phone overnight and she does the exact same thing, only it's not downtown Dallas. It's the entire world. So we often parent physically really well. We just have to draw the connection to parent digitally to the same extent. Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that, Noelle?
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of your human trafficking, I won't give too much stuff on that, but 87% of contact with human trafficking is initiated through social media. So whether that's, any of the platforms, whether that's through games, whether it's you get this random email, hey, you look really pretty, I run a modeling agency, whatever. But 87% of first contact with a human trafficker starts on social media. And so there is, I was going to touch on this part real quick. There's a luring technique that traffickers use. It's called the Romeo pimping. And so what that can look like is, there's a vulnerable girl, boy, what have you, and somebody says that they're, oh, I'm so in love with you and you're meant to be, you're my soulmate, and they just like love on this person. I'm giving you all these gifts and showing you all this love. We're going to be together forever. Let's say it goes on for 2 or 3 months. So now this Romeo individual has now lured in this other kid. And so what happens is that, love interest, whatever, the Romeo person has said, your family's terrible. I can give you a much better life. This person's now almost brainwashed to the point of, this is the only person for me. After a couple of months, that person will say, hey, I want you to come meet somebody. They're going to help us establish this new life together, or they're really cool. We'll stay in touch with them. That ends up being like the lead trafficker. And so now let's just say this girl is now lured into this trafficking ring. This boy or girl, gender, it doesn't matter. It's both. But for the sake of the story, so the girl's lured in. The boy who was the Romeo is also being trafficked. Their role in the trafficking ring is to lure in other kids to be trafficked. So I've seen so often where students come and talk to me about, oh, I met this boy online and, oh, I think it's just so amazing and we're meant to be and blah, blah, blah. We've been talking for 3 days or maybe even 2 weeks. I'll give them 2 weeks. And just how perfect, and, oh, we're going to meet up and this and this. And, we have to have some hard conversations about that. So, it's just, just this whole thing is just, let's just be mindful and aware of what our kids are doing, as much as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary. Which is why everything we've said so far plays into how do you combat that? We've been talking about it. It doesn't feel like these are revolutionary things, but they are. Being invested in your kids, understanding where your kids are coming from long before you understand the app. You don't have to understand the app. You need to understand your kid. You're not trying to parent Twitter. You're not trying to parent your kid on how to use Snapchat. You're trying to parent your child through relationships and through life. And sometimes that happens on Snapchat. And sometimes that happens on Instagram. But you're not trying to parent through Instagram. You're just trying to parent your kid about life. And you can totally do that. So the last thing is one more thing about that technique. That is one technique that is called in an umbrella of things that is called grooming. And that can happen through any app that has a chat function, any app. I heard parents talk about their 13-year-old boy got introduced to a trafficker through a Pokemon app because it had a chat function. So any app, any game, any whatever that has a chat function has the potential, has the reality of people coming in there trying to do that very thing. So is an app good? You can go app by app, but just know that any app, that should be like one of your first questions. Does it have a chat function? Okay, then there is always danger there. But I also don't want to scare you away from, it's complicated. Okay, so the third thing real fast is to set boundaries. There it is. Okay. Set boundaries. If you're an introvert, I'm not. I'm like a professional extrovert. But if you are an introvert, I just want you to fathom for a second being at a party that never ends. Just think about you're stuck there. You have to talk to people indefinitely. It never stops. And if that doesn't, my husband is the very opposite, and it makes him break out in hives just thinking about that. That's what it's like for our kids when we don't help them set boundaries with social media, because it is the online extension of their regular life. If we are not helping them establish healthy boundaries in relationship, then they're failing, and they're suffocating under the weight of keeping up with all of this. So a couple things we do in our house to help set boundaries is one, we have tech-free zones and times. Now, I can tell you our tech-free zones and times. I don't know that that's super helpful because we're not you. So what I do consistently is I ask my husband, hey, when am I on my phone when you wish I weren't? And he always has an answer, and it always surprises me. It's times that I'm like, well, shoot, that's like the one time that, he's like, when we're driving in the car and you're in the passenger seat, I'm like, that's prime time, man. He doesn't like it. And so I'm not on my phone when I'm in the passenger seat. I ask my kids the same thing. Hey, when am I on my phone that you just wish I weren't? Oh, when we go to the park, I just wish you'd play with us. Okay, sweet. I'm not going to play with you every time, because like that's part of why we go to the park is so that you go play. But there are times that are just important to my kids. One of the times that's important to me is at meal times. If we're at a restaurant, we're not going to be on our devices. And even though my kids, they're 9, 7, and 5, even though they're still little enough that it's like kind of cute if they have an iPad, I'm fast forwarding 10 years from now. Is it still going to be cute when my 15-year-old is sitting at the table doing this? And am I going to like that? No. So we're going to start now. We don't have devices at the table. So we have our own tech-free zones and times. I also delete all of my social media apps on the weekends. I take a break every weekend. I delete them on Friday night and I re-download them on Sunday sometimes, except during election season. I just didn't re-download them for a long time. But I purposefully take these breaks from social media every weekend. It's one of the ways that I just have a rhythm of keeping myself in check. And I encourage my students to do that a lot, and it works. If you can talk them into doing that, it really makes a world of difference, because they realize that life goes on and they're going to be okay. Another thing I encourage my students with is, that sounds kind of dumb, but it's really effective. If you move around your apps, if you just randomly rearrange your apps on your phone, when you open your phone, more often than not, your thumb is the thing that's thinking. It's not your brain. And so I open my phone and I immediately click on Instagram. Well, if the Instagram app is not there where it normally is, it causes my brain to re-engage with what I'm doing. And then I say, wait, why was I trying to get on there? I was trying to call somebody. Why am I trying to click on Instagram right now? So that's another really effective, if you can convince your kids, hey, rearrange your apps. If you feel like you're struggling with this, you can't get a break from it, just trick your mind, like stay engaged on what you're doing on your phone. So that's one thing we do. The other thing that is just, so we already kind of covered this, but I just want to bring it home one more time, is to move the phone from the nightstand. It is just, there's just absolutely no reason your kid needs to have a device overnight. I have a lot of parents say, well, it's their alarm clock. Okay, well, Walmart also has them for about $1. So just go buy them an alarm clock. Or, well, they're working on homework. Okay, let's put that in the physical digital parenting terms. Let's think through that. So if we're saying that you can do your homework all night long in your room on your phone, then sometimes you're going to have like a science partner. Am I also going to allow your science partner to spend the night in your room all night long to work on homework? Probably not. Okay, so then we also can do homework during certain times and places and hours. Phone overnight is never a good idea. Doesn't matter how good your kid is. I bet all your kids are awesome, but like it's just too big for them to handle. Like it's actually too big for them to handle. So that was a lot of information, you guys. We went through it pretty quick. We have about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say another good maybe not boundary, but just something to do with tech-free. We do the same kind of things, tech-free zones, nothing at the table. But a big one that we do, and I'm going to repeat one that you said that you did also, Sarah, is, so one of the things we do is we try to limit the double screen. So if we're watching a movie, we're not also on our phones while watching a movie. Or if we're playing something on the tablet, we're not having our phone and this. It's just too many things, because we should all be doing something together. I think that's the point, is that connection piece and that relationship piece. It's hard to focus on both the movie and whatever you've got going on your phone. That was one. And then, Sarah, something you mentioned that I really enjoyed, and I have started incorporating that with my little one, is to share what you're doing on your phone. Yeah. So if you're like, kind of doing something on your phone, just letting you know, I'm sorry, you can't see my phone.
I'll be
thank you. Hey, I'm sending this work email, and I flipped it around so you can see it's an email. So, we'll see, now I'm looking at pictures on Instagram of cookie decorating, and here's cookies. So that way it becomes comfortable for them in the future, even to say, well, this is something I'm doing, or so it's not secretive, right? Or they're not hiding something, because then that's when it can be really questionable or concerning.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny that I'm so glad you mentioned those, because I was looking at them in my notes and I was like, oh, we don't have time. So I'm glad that you mentioned one of the reasons we limit double screening is because there have been studies shown that if you have, first off, my generation apparently can take in 3 screens at a time. We can see 3 screens and know what's going on all of those screens. The generation behind me, the cyber whatever they're called, they can take in 5 screens at a time. Which, when I first read that, I'm like, that might be a cool fact, but why? Why are we taking in 5 screens at a time? And so that's when I'm like, this just feels like a self-control problem. And so in our house, and Noelle, we limit double screening, meaning exactly what she said. Like, my husband and I were terrible about, we would watch a TV show in bed or something, but then we'd both be on our phones. I'm like, why are we doing this? If we're going to be on our phones, then let's be on our phones. If we're going to watch the show, then let's watch the show. And what was the other thing you said? I was going to
about showing what you're doing.
Yes. Yes, because it seems secretive. You have no idea what I'm doing over here. I could be saving the world, or I could be doing something. I could be like hiring an assassin. You don't know. Anything in between. I don't know why those were my two examples.
I don't know either. But you never know.
I know, that's the point. So it can feel like kind of sinister. Like, I don't know what she's doing. It's kind of secretive. And I want this to be a very natural motion in our house. Oh yeah, I'm just sending a text. Or honestly, more often than not, my kids will pull on my arm like, mom, 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 mom. And I'm like, hold on, making them feel like they're not as important, first off.
Yes.
But then when it clicks and I'm like, okay, I need to show them what I'm doing, more often than not, I'll be like, you know what? I'm watching videos that I don't know why I'm watching. Let's put it up. Let's do something different. And so
yes. Kind of put you in check.
Exactly. It's accountability for me. So that's so good. Okay. We only have a few minutes left. Are we good with questions, Noelle?
Yeah, I'm good. Whoever has any questions.
Anyone have a question? You can either unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat, or we can just do crickets and just sit here.
I mean, we could probably keep talking.
That's true. I mean,
maybe they're done hearing us.
Well, one thing I did want to mention is in May, and I apologize, I didn't bring the date with me. Just watch out on the district emails for this one, but we are having a webinar saying what you need to know about that app your kid loves. And so that is going to happen in May, and that's going to go into more of the detail, of just the ins and outs of the apps and maybe ages that it's appropriate and different parenting devices that can help you monitor. Because I mean, there's a lot of things that y'all brought up. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, what age do you even introduce some of this? And, I just want to protect my kid and maybe not. Or, goodness, I've already given them all this freedom, and how do I rein that in?
Yes.
Those are big things. So
that's great. Yeah. Everyone should go to that. Maybe I'll come to that.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. But did anyone else want to ask our guest tonight a question as we wrap things up?
Or if you have anything, you put it in the chat. Or in the chat.
Anything that was helpful, or I hadn't thought about that.
Something that someone had sent, they appreciated the thought of, they had never thought about the aspect of the physical and the digital parenting and how they really kind of should be pretty equal. And they hadn't thought about that before, and they appreciated that.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I think like she said, sometimes it's so easy we have all these great things in place and, but here's your tablet, just go do what you need to do. And not even think, oh wait, that's actually parenting also.
Right. It's just so easy.
Well,
yeah, sure.
Another thing, Sarah, that stood out to me is when you said the kids themselves were figuring out how unhealthy some of this stuff was.
Yeah.
They're smart. And so I'm convinced, like you, that we're gonna turn a corner at some point here, as the kids behind us growing up, but also your kids, and their brains get more developed, all that, they'll turn a corner too, and realize, okay, I want to live, life in the real world and on digital, but we still can't get away from where we're at, and all that, that going to be a part of their life for sure. So just helping them navigate through all that. Thank you for guiding us in some thoughts tonight to help us. But I think that, like I said, have these real conversations with your kids, and you'd be amazed at how much they're already like, yeah, I know that might not be the best thing for me, or yeah, mom, I actually want help. Please help me control this instead of letting it overtake their time.
Yeah. And I will say that when I've encouraged some of my students to take a break from social media, delete it off your phone, just take a screen break. And I even asked, how long would you say you play video games on a nightly basis? Times that by 7, times that by 4. That's how many, really kind of putting it into perspective for them. And when they do actually take me up, when I say, I challenge you to do this, when they take you up on the challenge, they tell you, I actually kind of feel a little bit better. Oh, imagine that. It feels so much better. Someone did ask about some book recommendations. I actually have some. They're right next to me right here. Let me go grab them and I'll show them.
And while you're doing that,
you guys have anything?
To Cynthia, I think something that's really encouraging to me is that I work with students from middle school to high school, and watching them mature and grow, as all middle school and high school kids do. I see them, once they get into college, once they become young adults, once they get into the workforce, there is a significant change in their perspective when it comes to social media. And you're so right that we can't ignore it. So we need to get in and help them navigate it better, because they don't know what they're doing, and we may not know what we're doing either, but we have the life experience to help them through life, which is what we're doing. But it's so encouraging to me when I see them grow and mature, and once they enter the real world and realize some of the ways they've been communicating don't really cut it, or they're a little bit shallow, I see that in them as they get into these serious relationships, that they're like, oh man, this is not as, this is deeper. I like this. Honestly, it's like the older crowd now that I want to grab and be like, what are you doing on Facebook?
It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
You're ruining everything. They will grow and mature and learn just like we all did.
Sure. Okay, so I have two books that just have some interesting information in it. So the first one is called Irresistible by Adam Alter. Oh, look, it's working.
Yeah, you gotta hold it.
There we go. I think. Yeah, Irresistible. The Rise of Addictive Technology in the Business of Keeping Us Hooked. So Adam Alter talks all about how different apps, websites, everything are designed to keep you coming back or keeping you sucked in, and how much time we're truly spending on a device every day. So it's really interesting. This one I really, really like. It's Reset Your Child's Brain by Dr. Victoria Dunkley. I believe she's a psychiatrist. Here, let me see.
Nope.
Almost.
There you go.
There it is. Don't move.
Sorry, I'm in my room and I just want you to look at the school instead. But anyway, so it's Reset Your Child's Brain. And I'll type these in the chat too. So this one, Dr. Dunkley, like I said, is a psychiatrist, I believe. Yes, psychiatrist. So what she does is, meets with all these kids that, like kind of what I was talking about earlier, where she talks about, she's meeting with kids that have depression or anxiety, or they're showing these signs. And before she moves forward with treatment, she tells them, I need you to take a screen detox. And I believe hers is a 4-week screen detox. And she kind of goes through what that can look like. And it even has on here, it's a plan, like a 4-week plan of how you can do that. With goals and all that stuff. Either way, so what she realizes is that a lot of these symptoms of these mental health issues just go away. And they realize, oh, it's actually because of the screen the whole time. So it's really, it's very fascinating. I talk about this book all the time with my students, their parents. I'm like, you don't have to buy the book and read it. I just need you to know this is the information behind it. So those are at least the two that I know of that I really got a lot out of. Hopefully that helped a little bit.
Good as well, William. That's a good resource. I was going to mention.
Awesome. Sarah got muted.
One of the other resources, there's a couple other resources that I meant to point out. One is Common Sense Media. If you are not familiar with it, I love it. I just got on the other day and noticed that I think they might be shifting to like a subscription service, which makes me really sad. But Common Sense Media, it reviews and rates and it just gives you a whole host of information about books, apps, movies, games, all kinds of things. It tells you the appropriate age from what the kids think is the right age and what the parents think is the right age. And it just is so great. Before my kids are going to read a chapter book, I go to Common Sense Media and read the reviews on it. If they want to download a new game and I'm like, I'll go to Common Sense Media. That is my go-to. It's really great. And some friends of mine at Teen Life is an organization that helps teenagers that are in hard places. NGO.
Yeah, NGO, I think.
Weird. Okay.
It is.
They have a podcast that is, I think it's just called Teen Life Podcast. I'll see if I can find the link here in just a second.
Yeah, I'll look for it there.
Okay. They talk about teenagers. And what I love about Teen Life is they always say, teenagers are not a problem to be solved. We love teenagers and we think that they are awesome and have all of these great qualities. They just need someone to help them draw those out. And so the podcast is really helpful. They have a lot of guests on there talking about different stuff, but just helping you understand better teenagers better, and also just giving you a hopeful perspective of them. Like, man, this really is a cool time in life. And here's how we can understand them better and also just walk with them better through life. So the Teen Life podcast, you just linked to that, is also pretty great.
Wonderful. Well, thanks y'all so much. I will go ahead and end our time tonight just to honor people's evenings. So thanks again. And just know there's a wealth of resources that y'all just shared. And I can also add that to the parenting website for the district. Does someone have a question?
No, I was just going to say that was great. And I also added my email address to the chat box. So if anybody has any other questions or just has specific questions about their child or what have you, feel free to shoot me an email.
Thank you, Noelle. It's very kind of you.
Sure.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being here. If you joined us late, I know some people did, that we'd love for you again to go back to the website, nisdtx.org, just /PE, and I'll have tonight's webinar posted in probably about 30 minutes. And you can explore the things we talked about. It's a big topic. And so thank you. We have some nuggets to go to and help us, decide what our next step is. And parents, don't feel like you have to do it all. Just choose one thing that you're like, I'm going to start with that one and go for it. And it's going to make a difference. It will, I promise.
Absolutely.
So thanks, ladies. And
thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. And we'll see everyone another time. I hope you join us for another webinar.